What's up, y'all? Talon here. Today we're going to be going over the top teams from the European International Championship, ultimately won by, of course, none other than Wolfe Glick. Honestly, an excellent performance from Wolfe's opponent, Dill, in the finals. Honestly, just like really down to the wire, literally to the last turn when it was just a targeting decision on either side, and Wolfe came out on top, but don't want to diminish their incredible accomplishment at this event. So going to be going onto EV spread recreations of all of the top 8 teams. Unfortunately, don't have the time to do all the top 16 or top 24 like sometimes I do, but hopefully y'all enjoy this as a resource for tournament prep. And if you do enjoy, please show your appreciation by liking the video, commenting on what you want to see in the future, and subscribing to the channel so that you see more in the future. With all that being said, let's hop into the top 8 teams and the EV spreads that I've made for them. So for Wolfe's team, there's a lot of stream footage, so I know I have a good estimate on HP numbers, general bulk of the Pokemon, but that isn't going to be the case for all the players if they were not stream side, or just weren't featured on the stream. So hopefully I got pretty close for most, but definitely not going to be an exact recreation of everyone's teams. Honestly, just speaking on Wolfe's victory, the level of play was immaculate as always, but honestly, the post-victory speech was pretty legendary. I'm most fond of, I think, Paul Ruiz's 2018 World Championship speech, but I think this one tops it. Definitely just breathes a lot of fire into the game and really makes me excited to see VGC continue to grow as a spectator sport in that regard. So congrats to Wolfe. But moving to the actual team, we have a very interesting Koraidon set that was taking names throughout the day. It's a Life Orb set. Typically we see Clear Amulet be the more dominant one, but this one is Life Orb with Close Combat over the signature Collision Course because it deals a lot more damage. I think if you were Life Orb Collision Course, you wouldn't knock out Urshifu in one hit from Jolly Koraidon, but Close Combat Life Orb from even Jolly Koraidon, you don't have to go Adamant, knocks out a no bulk Urshifu, which is pretty crazy. Terrifier Flare Blitz from Life Orb also just does absurd damage, and then Flame Charge is your option to speed boost. So if you're up against a Calyrex team and they don't have it in early, you can go for Flame Charge, outspeed it later in the game and knock it out with a Flare Blitz. Or as we saw in many stream games, a lot of them are trending, or a lot of the Covert Cloak Calyrex Shadow Riders are trending a little bit slower, some even going slower than Jolly Koraidon, because most Koraidon before this tournament were running Adamant with a bit of bulk. A lot of the Miraidon were similarly running the Modest Nature to get some key KOs and honestly run a lot more bulk. We saw the rise of bulky Miraidon a whole lot at this tournament, but Wolfe taking full advantage of that with the Jolly Koraidon, and just incredible performance. I think Koraidon's first huge event win, and on a team that's definitely very unique for Koraidon team. So Gothitelle is the next Pokemon. I think Gothitelle, obviously there's the Perish element, which we'll get to in a second, but the Gothitelle Koraidon lead is honestly threatening in its own right, just because if you lead unfavorably, like you have an Urshifu, you can just close combat that for a knockout. Incineroar similarly, fake out, close combat, free KO. Really, there's not a whole lot in the metagame that loves being trapped in against the Koraidon. If you don't lead Incineroar into this, you basically just have the Koraidon at neutral and you can't switch your Pokemon out into the Incineroar to bring the attack stat down with the Intimidate. So a lot of synergy there. Speaking on the EV spreads, whoops, I think I'm supposed to be calm here. I'm not sure. I think I was EVing this specifically to take a Glacial Lance, make it a 3-hit KO after leftovers, which is pretty cool. For the moveset, we have Fake Out to provide support for the Koraidon and generally just lock things in place for the Scream Tail's Encore Disable Traps. Psychic is appreciated damage. Koraidons will sometimes leave something with a little bit of HP for more bulky Pokemon, so having Psychic to clean them up can be important. Then Taunt is really important against Amoonguss. Like a Terra Water Amoonguss, you don't have anything super effective on the team to handle that. So having the Taunt on the Gothitelle to just stop it in its tracks and prevent it from being so much of a nuisance is cool. And then Protect is very essential on Perish Trap teams. Every Pokemon on this team has Protect, even Incineroar, so that really just allows Wolfe to go for his Perish Trap options and not be restricted, where someone can basically just double the Pokemon on the team that doesn't have Protect and allow the Perish Trap to be less effective that way. I do want to comment a bit on the speed. So naturally, the Gothitelle hits 85 speed, but I think 20 EVs is kind of nice. Some Incineroar will run 85 speed, so that in Tailwind, they'll be able to outspeed Landorus Incarnate at max speed. And that's common enough that I thought that running it at this speed could be cool. Some of them run 90 speed to be able to outspeed Ogerpon in Tailwind, max speed Ogerpon. So you could creep up to, 91 or something, or 92 to deal with that. But at some point, you do start to sacrifice stats in bulk for just one thing that may or may not come up, and they might just knock you off instead of going for Parting Shot, which is what you're really trying to taunt them for. I'm not sure if I mentioned that, but you could run a bit more speed if you wanted to have a faster Fake Out or Taunt against Incineroar, but I think general bulk is going to be, go a lot further. Amoonguss is the next Pokemon, and it might not look special, but Terra Dark and Mental Herb are pretty irregular. I think the Terra Dark is to be a little bit more useful against Shadow Rider because you're not really worried about the Prankster taunts. Like the Terra Dark does grant you immunity to Terra Dark Taunt, but because you have Mental Herb, they'd have to go for 2 of those anyways to stop you from going for Spore or Rage Powder. So I do think this is more targeted at Psychic type moves in general. I'm running it with enough defensive ease to be able to live a Glacial Lance from a Calyrex Ice Rider max attack. This calc can be pretty important if you're playing against a Calyrex Ice Rider team where you want the Amoonguss to be coming in on a Glacial Lance before it has gotten a boost and sporing it before the Trick Room turns can get too out of control. Correspondingly, we're running a min speed Amoonguss, which functions to move before everything in Trick Room outside of like Torkoal and Hatterene in this metagame, and also make sure that it pairs well with the Parasong, so that if you Parasong another Amoonguss, if they're running, say, 47 speed or something like that, to make sure that they underspeed minimum speed Calyrex Ice in Trick Room, but still outspeed other Amoonguss so that they can Pollen Puff before you would Pollen Puff or Sludge Bomb to take a knockout, which Amoonguss speed wars are kind of a weird thing in the metagame, but just going minimum speed means that you're at worst going to be speed tying on the Perish Trap turns, which could be important. Next up is Wolfe's Incineroar, which we may or may not be getting a distribution event for, so that we get the classic you send out Wolfe's Incineroar. I know a lot of people are asking after that. Speaking on the Incineroar, it's nothing too crazy. I'm not sure if the EVs are correct here. Typically, we'll see a relaxed or impish Incineroar with this EV spread to be able to take a Surging Strikes from Adamant Urshifu like 85% of the time, but because you have the Koraidon activating the Sun, maybe you just end up going specially defensive on the Incineroar. I'm not really sure what direction Wolfe went. I didn't scrub the matches for specific damage calcs, but yeah, a good general utility EV spread, once again going min speed to be able to make sure that you're parting shotting before or after other Incineroar so that you get the Koraidon in safely, or just any of your offensive attackers safely, as well as having the advantage of seeing what your opponent switches in before you switch in your Pokemon that turn. And then of course, because the Perish turns go off in the speed order, having the slowest Incineroar means that in an endgame situation where everything's perished, the Incineroar is likely to be the slowest Pokemon on the field, and faint last from the Parasong, making you win the game. Next up is the star of the show, didn't make an appearance in finals, but was definitely clutch in all of, I think most of Wolfe's top 8 sets he brought it, so was able to show that off for sure. The Encore Disable Trap is very devious with both, with double Fake Out on the Incineroar and Gothitelle. You can really just Fake Out a Pokemon and then just Encore or Disable the partner and just really start to limit their options, which when you're playing against Wolfe, you definitely want to have all your options, and him limiting switching, locking things into moves and then disabling them and then just forcing you to struggle was something that happened pretty often on stream. If you had a choice Pokemon on your team and you weren't Dill, basically Wolfe was just locking you down with the Scream Tail, and it was very impressive. Terra Dark here is definitely targeted at the Prankster taunt users. Makes sense, you don't have an attacking move on this Scream Tail, which Wolfe has run in the past. I think he ran Play Rough in the original Perish Trap win so that he could hit a Scream or a Roaring Moon and knock it out or something like that, but no attack moves here, just prioritizing support, so the Terra Dark covers that very well. Speaking on the Scream Tail set, I have it pretty quick here. You could probably go slower, but I was thinking, okay, if you play against a Choice Scarf Chi-Yu, you'll want to be able to disable that, and Choice Scarf Landorus is reasonably common in the metagame on some Calyrex Ice Rider teams, so just bumping that by 1 point and making sure you can disable those choice Pokemon felt important to me when you have the Booster Energy or the Sun Boosted Photosynthesis active. Outside of that, I'm going for General Bulk, running max HP to take hits on the defensive and special side pretty well, and then a bit of defensive investment to be able to tank a Glacial Lance for a 3-hit KO, and the rest dumped in special defense so that you can take a timid max speed Astral Barrage from Calyrex Shadow Rider. Last up on the team, very simple EV spread, max, timid, and then Focus Sash, Moonblast, Shadow Ball, Icy Wind, Fluttermane. This is an essential tool to be able to deal with the Ghost type Pokemon that get around your Scream Tail, Gothitelle, Amoonguss, and Incineroar core. Basically, the Fluttermane and the Koraidon are the breakers on the team, and having the Icy Wind support allows the Koraidon to outspeed and knock out a Calyrex Shadow Rider, independent of having to guess if they're going to Terra and go for a Shadow Ball. You can just go for Icy Wind if they don't have a redirection Pokemon in the field, and then knock it out with a Flare Blitz. Overall, this team kind of came out of left field. I don't think anyone was really expecting Perish Trap to have another tournament win, especially in Regulation G, just because the format is so fast-paced that people didn't expect a team where you have to wait 3 turns to take knockouts to be particularly effective, especially when there's a Ghost type as strong as Calyrex Shadow Rider in the meta. But of course, Wolfe was able to do it. Congrats to him. He also won the Global Challenge. Didn't reveal it until the stream interview, so overall a super hype finals and a hype victory for him. At this point, I'm comfortable calling him the GOAT, even better than Ray. I think this international was easily a Worlds level event in terms of the caliber of players there. We had some of the top Japanese players, The 2023 world champion Zine was there. Luca Ceribelli, Wolfe even beat in this tournament. So to me, this is like on par with a world's victory. So congrats to him. That's my goat, dude. Yeah, moving on from my nerd out session. This is Dill's team. Dill was running a miraculously bulky Miraidon, 197 HP stat. And honestly, there was one Miraidon on stream with 207, which is max HP. So yeah, people were really bulking down their Miraidons this tournament. I have the EV spread so that you're tanking a Glacial Lance most of the time from Calyrex Ice Rider, which if you go for Terra Fairy, suddenly it's a 3-hit KO. A lot of Calyrex Ice Riders are counting on that taking a knockout or a 2-hit knockout after the Terra, so this can definitely sway that matchup pretty significantly. Beyond that, we're running very little speed, just outspeeding what I hope a Zamazenta would go for, but some could definitely creep a bit more. I think the standard speed for a while was 170, but if they're creeping each other, you could end up in a weird spot where you're underspeeding them or speed tying with them. Outside of that, you're hitting pretty hard, even with not a lot of investment in the special attack stat. You're still modest, you're still choice specs, and have the Hadron engine boost active a lot of the time, so a lot of bulk there. Iron Treads is another Pokemon that, like Perish, people weren't really anticipating being super strong coming into the tournament, but it definitely makes sense on a Miraidon team. With the Quark Drive, you get a speed boost, and the Choice Band, you have a very strong attacking stat. Ground coverage is kind of neglected in this format. We really just have Landorus and I guess high horsepower from Calyrex Ice Rider. So we saw a Choice Band Iron Treads just knocking out Iron Hands on stream, which is very rare. So having a clearing option like that, especially on a Miraidon team, since most people bring Iron Hands as their Miraidon counter, is a very smart option. Outside of that, we have Iron Head as its secondary stab option, Rock Slide if you need to start, flinching things in the end game or just need spread moves, and then Steel Roller is interesting. It will end your own terrain, so definitely a last-ditch effort, but if for some reason it's come down to an endgame where you just really need to max out your damage on one turn, Steel Roller is going to be your best bet there. For the EV spreads, I've made sure to hit the 170 stat with the Choice Band or with the Quark Drive for a speed boost. You could max it out. You're not really getting that much bulk off of the 20 HP, so you could just go here, maybe run a defense stat, and then have 173 speed, so you're not worried about, for example, this would outspeed Wolfe's Scream Tail that I EV'd for. So there's a lot of things, still also outspeeding without the Quark Drive, a Chi-Yu without a Choice Scarf, and if you have Quark Drive active, you'll outspeed any Chi-Yu with Choice Scarf. So I do think that you'll at least want to hit 170, but while you're there, you might as well just max out. Next up, we have a standard Urshifu single strike with Terra Dark, so just really maxing out your offenses here, being able to ignore Intimidate. I do think that Dark-type Urshifu will go for close combat a bit more oftentimes than a Urshifu Rapid Strike will, so having a Miraidon to just completely clear out Incineroar very easily with Electro Drift or Draco Meteor means you're able to go for the close combats a little more easily. Going into the Incineroar, it's a very interesting set, so on almost every non-Assault Vest Incineroar, we'll see Parting Shot over U-Turn, but here we have Dill going for U-Turn, and that was pretty important in finals, honestly. At one point, Dill targeted a U-turn into Wolfe's Fluttermane switch in, and it broke the Focus Sash, which meant that at any point in the rest of the battle, Dill had a knockout into the Fluttermane. So for situations like that, or just when you need a little bit of damage while you're pivoting, the U-turn is a little bit better, but interesting choice there. Beyond that, we have a Rocky Helmet set with the max defense, or not max defense, but this is the max investment that you should go for if you want to be taking Surging Strikes better from Urshifu. If there are not any boosts on the Urshifu, they're just max attack adamant, then you have a 85% chance to live the hit, and they're going to take 50% damage from your Rocky Helmet. Typically, if we see Incineroar on these type of teams, it is Assault Vest, but Dill going for the Rocky Helmet, just saying, okay, Urshifu could be a problem for my Iron Treads. I could see that being an issue. Potentially Surging Strikes the Electric Seed on Farigiraf, and the Iron Hand's not a defensive Terra. Yeah, it's not Terra Water, so it can't resist the Surging Strikes. So having the Incineroar as a good switch in for both close combat and Surging Strikes with the max defense set is why I imagine it's there. It also just handles, you have two Dark types on this team and then Farigiraf, so you're easily handing Calyrex Shadow Rider Astro Barrages. Next up, we have Farigiraf Iron Hands, which aren't particularly interesting. We have Drain Punch, Low Kick, Heavy Slam, Fake Out, which is, I think, the standard set. Running min speed here to be able to, at worst, underspeed a Calyrex Ice, not underspeed, but speed tie a min speed Calyrex Ice Rider in Trick Room, which can be important. You can go for a Helping Hand Low Kick to deal, I think, 80 to 90% to that. So you have any chip on it already, that's going to do, really swing the matchup. Poison's a cool Terra type because you can resist the fairy moves. We saw Dill try to pull that off against Wolfe in the finals, but unfortunately, Shadow Ball, double up went into that slot, predicting that. But yeah, in most situations, you can lock down Fluttermanes or other Pokemon trying to hit you with fairy type moves with the Terra Poison. And it also resists fighting types, which means that In the mirror against opposing Iron Hands, you have a huge advantage where you're drain punching them and dealing a lot of damage and healing back, whereas they can't drain punch you and heal back for very much. Last up is the Ferrograph, which is fairly standard on all accounts aside from Roar being the fourth move. Usually that's foul play, but because of all the dark types, I imagine that Dill didn't want to double up there. Roar very good against opposing Trick Room teams. It's good against Perish Trap. Wolf pretty much couldn't bring Perish against Dill because of U-Turn Incineroar, Wicked Blow Urshifu, Volt Switch Miraidon, and Roar Ferrograph being able to roar out your own Pokemon to reset the Perish. But it's also really cool because if you lead the Miraidon, you can't be fake outed on the Miraidon. You can go for Draco Meteor and knock something out. You can actually self-roar in that situation to get either Urshifu or Iron Hands in. You don't lose tempo by going for Draco Meteor and having a -2 Miraidon in the field because you get all the benefits of the Draco as well as kind of the benefits of a Volt Switch by self-roaring. Congrats to Dill. It was a huge breakout tournament for them, and I'm excited to see what they can do in the future. Next up, we have a team by Yosuke Takeyanagi, who has done really well at the World Championship in the last 2 years. 33rd, I think it was, in 2023, and in 2024, 12th place. Both with, I think, hard Trick Room teams. I'm not entirely sure of that. Running a team with Trick Room here, but it definitely doesn't function as a solo Trick Room. We have a bunch of fast Pokemon in Fluttermane, Urshifu, Chi-Yu, and Cornerstone Ogerpon, and then the ever-present Amoonguss Calyrex Ice Rider combo, but really that's more supplemental. Like, you can go into Trick Room late game after the faster Pokemon have chipped things down in range for Glacial Lance, and then you can go for Spore boosted Glacial Lance in Trick Room for the rest of the game. But looking at the team in a bit of detail, I don't want to go into too much, but we have a faster Calyrex Ice Rider. I think I would probably EV for this so that you're 90 speed, meaning that if you go for Icy Wind twice against an Ogerpon, you'll outspeed it for sure, and knock it out with a Glacial Lance. I think I'd go that fast, but you could also just go min speed, max out your HP, maybe go into special defense a little bit. I think if you run 252, 116 in special defense, you live a Draco Meteor from Modest or maybe Timid Miraidon. But yeah, I think for this, I will probably just put it at the 90 speed stat and keep it there. Definitely worth experimenting with the different speeds here, though. We have an Amoonguss with a Clear Smog option instead of the Protect we usually see. Pollen Puff is almost always a mainstay just to heal up your Calyrex Ice Rider, make it unbreakable. But Clear Smog is definitely a good innovation to be able to deal with all the Dondozo rising up in the metagame. That's the main setup component that you're trying to Clear Smog away, but for some reason, if your Calyrex gets its attack lowered, for example, a knockoff and a Parting Shot combination from Incineroar, but you have it low enough that a neutral Glacial Lance will knock it out on switch in. We saw Paul Chwood try and do this on stream. You go for Clear Smog into your Calyrex Ice Rider. In Trick Room, you move before the Calyrex, and then you go for a Glacial Lance at neutral, at neutral against a Intimidate switch-in. I think this team is largely based off of the team that Hirofumi Kimura got top 16 at the World Championship with. A faster Calyrex Ice Rider, Fluttermane, Chi-Yu, Urshifu, and Cornerstone Ogerpon, but I want to say the Amoonguss was a Raging Bolt before, but going a bit more defensive with this Amoonguss. With that said, since I covered that Hirofumi team a number of times in recent months, I don't want to go into too much detail. This is a bulky Fluttermane. I think originally it was Terra Normal to handle Calyrex Shadow Rider a little bit better, but Amoonguss can swing that matchup a little bit more in your favor, so going with a more offensive Terra here on the Flutter. Moonblast, Dazzling Gleam, you can really clean up basically against Zamazenta who want to go for a Dragon Terra against your Urshifu a lot of the time. You can force that Terra and then bring in the Terra Fairy Fluttermane and go for Terra Fairy Moonblast to knock out the Zamazenta after a bit of chip. Outside of that, it's just a general utility speed control Pokemon. Typically for the Chi-Yu, I think Flutter Chi-Yu is a common enough lead, as is Urshifu Fluttermane. Speaking on the Urshifu, it is Terra Stellar Taunt, which has been a set that has been really popular recently. Terra Stellar means that with close combat, you can knock out a Terapagos from full HP or close to it if they're not running Bold, which is pretty cool, as well as still being able to boost out these Surging Strikes in a pinch. And then most Urshifu at the top level have been dropping Aqua Jet, since it's really situational when you'll actually use it, whereas Taunt you can kind of map game plans around. For example, you're better into Amoonguss, you're better into Trick Room teams. Just having the option to Taunt instead of just a situational Aqua Jet in terms of game planning is pretty cool. Chi-Yu is another fun set. We have Covert Cloak with Heat Wave, Overheat, Snarl. It means that against opposing Calyrex Shadow Rider teams where they're trying to cycle fake outs with Rillaboom and Incineroar frequently to prevent you from snarling or going for strong moves into their Calyrex, they can't fake you out because of Covert Cloak, and you can just go for Snarl around any Rage Powder to force them to Terra on their Calyrex Shadow Rider. Next up, we have the Ogerpon Cornerstone. Urshifu can be annoying with redirection like Amoonguss on a lot of Calyrex Ice Rider teams, just because you can redirect away the Fluttermane's Moonblast. If they go for a Terra, they can live the Dazzling Gleam. Your own Urshifu isn't great against it. Chi-Yu obviously at disadvantage. So having the Ogerpon, which can, with its natural grass typing, ignore the Rage Powder from an Amoonguss and hit it with a Power Whip, is definitely appreciated on these teams. So yeah, big finish for YT. Definitely one of Japan's greatest finishers whenever they're competing internationally. Next up, we have Terran, who got top 4. I think they top cut the World Championship as well. Don't want to go into too many details since their team is more or less just a Arubega variant. Definitely has its own take. I think it's a faster Miraidon on this team, more offensive than the other ones we saw on stream. Similar Whimsicott, the Covert Cloak, Tailwind, Light Screen, Encore. The Light Screen really essential in the Mirror and against Calyrex Shadow Rider teams to put you on an advantage. We've seen a shift away from the Focus Ash Urshifu sets towards a Mystic Water one. Speaking on the bulkier Urshifu spreads that I have in the video today, these are mostly variations of the spread that Justin Tang won the San Antonio Regional Championship. Ogerpon is the same bulky spread that Luca Cherubelli won the World Championship with. I think this has a good chance to live a Sword of Ruin Body Press from Zamazenta, as well as Surging Strike from most Urshifu. Even if they go for Terra Water, I want to say. I'm not sure about that. But check out Luca's Worlds report on Victory Road if you want to learn a little bit more detail about these EV spreads. I think this has to do with living Astro Barrages or something like that after Light Screen is up, and a lot of the EV spreads on this team are optimized around Light Screen being up. Moving to the Farigiraf, we're running a very physically defensive set with Electric Seed to combo off of the Electric Terrain being active from the Miraidon, making your Farigiraf really difficult for opposing Calyrex Ice Rider teams to clear through. Foul play if they ever get a attack boost and don't have Terra available, and even if they do, it's going to do a lot of damage. Beyond that, we're running a bit of speed to outspeed them outside of Trick Room, because we have a good speed sandwich here with the Min Speed Iron Hands and the faster Farigiraf. We can kind of have a strong move into them in and out of Trick Room. Last up is the Iron Hands running the Drain Punch Low Kick Heavy Slam set, the same one that Dill's using. I think pretty similar EV spreads as well, so I'm not going to go into further detail there. Okay, moving out of top 4, we see a lot of Miraidon teams actually in this top 8. So 1 in finals, 1 in top 4, and then 2 in top 8, both with Grimmsnarl actually in top 8. So interesting to see that development. I think most of them are pretty bulky. I know Grant's was running max HP, which might indicate that it's pretty crazy bulky. I'm running it a little bit faster than the team or the Miraidon that Luca won the World Championship with. You could try an EV to live a Glacial Lance outside of Reflect or, certain hits with Light Screen, but I think max HP is fine here just because you have the Grimmsnarl, so you can kind of control the damage a little bit easier than needing to bake it into your EV spread and still getting a lot of speed and attack from it. Speaking on the Grimmsnarl, I think it's the same on both team, a Light Clay Terra Ghost to be able to ignore Fake Out and make sure that you get screens up. Foul play to deal with opposing Calyrex Shadow Rider. If they don't Terra, basically you force them to Terra. And then same with Calyrex Ice Rider, they kind of have to Terra in front of a stab. Foul play if they don't want to get nearly knocked out. Reflect, Light Screen, great for the team's general bulk. We have Farigiraf, insanely bulky. Miraidon, the same. Iron Hands, just so tanky. With Drain Punch, Light Screen, Assault Vest, Reflect active, you're going to really have trouble dealing with this Pokemon. And with the attack boost on Quark Drive, you can really make that difficult for your opponents. I have the EV spread at 75 speed. You could I think actually 75 is correct. You can Thunder Wave a Urshifu Rapid Strike, which maxes out at 149 speed. So go for Thunder Wave early game on the Grimmsnarl, and then with the Quark Drive, whether it's active or not, a 200 attack Iron Hands has a very good, I think 87.5% chance to knock out an Urshifu Rapid Strike if it's only 4 HP. So if you have Quark Drive, that's going to knock out very easily, but if you don't in a late game and the Urshifu is paralyzed, you can just knock it out that way. Farigiraf is very similar to the other one. This one's Terra Dark. I'm not entirely sure what the purpose of that is, but Entei is a unique addition to the Miraidon teams. I don't think I've seen that before, running Life Orb with Sacred Fire, Terra Normal Extreme Speed, and Stomping Tantrum to be able to handle like Incineroar or I guess other Iron Hands. Stomping Tantrum is going to do a whole lot too, but generally you'll want to go for Sacred Fire to go for a burn against them. It is a legendary Pokemon, so pretty solid natural bulk, and it benefits from the screens a fair bit that way. Rapid Strike is the last Pokemon on the team. It really benefits from the light screen if you run a lot of bulk on it, and you don't really need a whole lot of speed in the first place, and if you run very low speed, you can actually combo off of Trick Room pretty well, so just outspeeding a max speed Incineroar +1, so maybe a Rillaboom's running 124, you can outspeed them, go for a strong U-turn, and if not, you can go for Terra Grass in front of them. It might be beneficial to run the Urshifu a bit faster if you're consistently being outsped by Rillabooms. I don't really expect that, but getting a strong U-turn or close combat into them is pretty important because they're oftentimes brought against Miraidon teams to override the Electric Terrain. Congrats to Grant on a well-earned win. Heard there was some craziness going on against Sisiot, but yeah, hopefully there's no more drama around that in the future. Next, we have Joe Ugarte. This is a team that I'm actually surprised he went back to. He was doing pretty well with Groudon. I don't think he had the San Antonio performance he was hoping for, so went for a team that has a bit better accuracy overall. But this is the team that I think he was really doing well with online before the World Championship, but just didn't really have the worlds he was anticipating or really hoping for. So it's cool to see him bring it back, just saying, okay, I believe in this team. I'm really good with it. I think now's the time to use it. And absolutely converted on that. It's a very standard Miraidon. I don't think we saw his HP stats on stream, so I'm just going with a very offensive one, but you could easily go for the similar type of bulky one that both Grant and Dill were using. We do, of course, have the Grimmsnarl, same set as Grant, so it could just be a very bulky Miraidon. So definitely experiment between the two, see which feels. Next, we have an Urshifu that combos really well with the Grimmsnarl. So we have Thunder Wave, Light Screen, Reflect. Instead of running Choice Band like Grant did, Joe's going for a Mystic Water Swords Dance set, which hits considerably harder after the one-turn delay of setting the Swords Dance up. A defensive Terra in Poison allows you to resist opposing fighting type moves, which could be cool against Iron Hands, I imagine, if they're running the Heavy Slam, no Wild Charge set. But the idea is you have the Miraidon, which is incredibly threatening. You also have a Volcarona, which can set up. Iron Hands with the Quark Drive active is very threatening. So even though you don't have Follow Me on this team or Rage Patter, there's many opportunities where the threat of the Pokemon next to the setup Pokemon is enough to redirect attention, allowing you to go for a Swords Dance or a Quiver Dance. Speaking of the Quiver Dance Volcarona, running Terra Grass, Citrus Berry, Giga Drain. With the Citrus Berry, I imagine you could go for a set where if you get a burn on like the first Surging Strike, if you haven't gone for Terra, you might be able to live all 3 hits from a Surging Strike Urshifu. I haven't gone that route. I've generally gone a bit faster to be able to not let that happen in the first place. You're running 150 speed to be able to outspeed an opposing Urshifu before it moves. Go for Terra Grass, Giga Drain if they're a Mystic Water one and take it out, or just bring it down to Sash, or just knock it out if it's already had its Sash broken. I think the Volcarona is a really good piece against opposing Zamazenta. It's pretty good against because it forces the Zama into going for a Terra in front of the Miraidon so that you can go for a Draco Meteor, not have to play Electro Drift Draco Mind Games. It also switches in pretty well to Calyrex Ice Rider. Once the Calyrex leaves the field, you can heal up with the Citrus Berry, and then against opposing physical attackers, like if you switch into a fighting type move, you can just burn them with Flame Body. So a lot of cool things this Volcarona can do. Next up, we'll go to the Iron Hands, another mainstay on Miraidon teams, but here Volt Switch instead of Heavy Slam or Low Kick is pretty non-standard, I would say, at this point in the meta game. Again, running a 75 speed sat so that after the Thunder Wave, we can outspeed and knock out an Urshifu Rapid Strike. I think originally Joe had Overheat on the Miraidon, but having double Volt Switch is pretty cool in that if you lead the Iron Hands Miraidon and your opponent switches in a Rillaboom, you go for Volt Switch with the Miraidon, switch out, and then go for the Volt Switch with the Iron Hands, and then now the Miraidon is back in with Electric Train up, and the Rillaboom's feeling a little bit threatened by the presence of a Electric Terrain Hadron Engine boosted Draco Meteor. Last Pokemon on the team is the Ditto. This is really your trump card against a Calyrex Ice Rider if it does end up getting going. You have, like, if he gets to +1 or +2 attack stat, you can copy that and then just reverse sweep your opponent in Trick Room if they have that set up. It's also pretty good against opposing Calyrex Shadow Rider. You could say Thunder Wave them early game, even if they go for the nasty plot. It's like, okay, it still has a lid on it because it's paralyzed, but then the Ditto eventually comes in. The boosts are still there, but you're not paralyzed. You can just, again, reverse sweep their Calyrex. Congrats to Joe. Definitely glad that he got the big finish that he was hoping for with this team. I know he was dominating like even Japanese online tournaments before the World Championship, so it was a bit of a surprise when he didn't have as strong of a Worlds this year. Next up, we have Gavin Michaels. His return tournament from being, not active in the game was San Antonio. I think he went 5-3, but it wasn't a spectacular finish for him. Here is a little bit more of what we would expect from a player of his caliber. We have a top 8 finish at EUIC with a very offensive Kyogre team. Looks to be taking some inspiration from the Pengi team who, Stefan Mott was also here. I think he got like just outside of top 32, but he top cut the San Antonio Regional Championships and I think went 9-3 here. 1 win away from cut. Speaking specifically on Gavin's team, we have a Tornadus. The V-spread here is being able to outspeed your own Kyogre. Just make sure you're moving first. Rain Dance important against opposing Koraidon teams. If they do get the Sun advantage on the field with your Kyogre unable to switch in, you can just go for Rain Dance and override that. Taunt can be important against opposing Amoonguss. You have a lot of respect for it with, I think, Terra Grass Kyogre, but no Terra Grass Urshifu and Terra Grass Iron Hand. So you do have respect for it. on your terrestrializations, but if you can get away with just taunting them instead of having to go for a Terra Grass, that's definitely appreciated. But the Tornadus' main function on the team is to set up the Kyogre to go for really fast, strong water spouts with Mystic Water. For the Kyogre, I'm running max speed to be able to outspeed even Adamant Urshifu, and so going for a water spout that more than 2 at KOs them can really be difficult for some of the like slower paced, bulky teams with Urshifu in the format. Outside of that though, we have these 3 special attackers. Amoonguss like doesn't really count as a special attacker. This team is really physically oriented. Really, you have the Rain set up by the Kyogre, you have Sword of Ruin active from the Chien-Pao to boost up Iron Hands, and really importantly, the Urshifu. If you have Rain up, you have Sword of Ruin up, and you go for Terra Water, even Pokemon that are not, like I think this has a really good chance to knock out Calyrex Ice Rider, I would guess. I think we saw it 2 at KO a Terra Water Ice Rider, so that's kind of an insane calc. If you burn their Terrestrialization on another Pokemon, you do just knock it out with your Urshifu. So yeah, basically you're playing with 2 restricteds on this team. You have your Kyogre and then your Terra Water Urshifu with Chien-Pao on the field. If Rain's active, yeah, it's just effectively a second restricted. Amoonguss and Iron Hands are really just there as defensive pieces to support the rest of this. Like you could imagine a match where you go Tornadus Kyogre, Tailwind Water Spout, okay, the Kyogre or the Tornadus goes down, bring in the Urshifu and then the Chien-Pao in the back and just try and overwhelm your opponent with offense. In matches where that won't work, maybe a Trick Room team, you have the Amoonguss and Iron Hands to handle them. Spore and Trick Room, you want to make sure you're 48 speed at the max to make sure that you're underspeeding a min speed Calyrex Ice Rider in Trick Room. You could go a bit slower. I think min speed Ursaluna goes to 48, but oftentimes you won't even have the opportunity to spore them because of their Guts Flame Orb combo. So yeah, you might just want to run this speed to make sure that you're outspeeding min speed Amoonguss and getting a Pollen Puff to knock them out or knock their partner out before they move. Clear Smog's interesting. I have to imagine this is like incredibly targeted at the Dondozo teams that have been rising in prominence. Terra Dark means that you can handle the Calyrex Shadow Riders on some of these teams, and then Clear Smog beats the Dozo pretty convincingly. Last up is the Iron Hands with Low Kick, Drain Punch, Wild Charge. This is just going to be a strong damage trader. For speed, running a bit more than I would typically do on an Iron Hands. Usually I'd go like 75 if we have a doubling measure like Thunder Wave, where we can Thunder Wave an Urshifu and knock it out. But here we have Tailwind, which means that even though we couldn't Thunder Wave a Dark type Chi-Yu, we can Tailwind in front of it and knock it out later with a Drain Punch on the Iron Hands if they are running Modest. Once again, congrats to Gavin on a huge top 8 win. Now we're going to go into Theatime's top 8 Calyrex Shadow Rider team. This does look very similar to a team that Adi Subramanian got top 4 at Los Angeles Regionals on, like very early in the format. So I've taken a lot of the EV spreads from that, the same Calyrex Shadow Rider EV spread because it is the same exact set. Covert Cloak, Astral Barrage, Draining Kiss, Calm Mind. Basically, with the double Fake Out and presence of Clefairy on this team, the focus is very, very obviously getting several Calm Minds up, any damage you take healing off with Terra Fairy, Draining Kiss, and then just taking knockouts with Astral Barrage to compound boost and just steal a ton of damage. Originally on that team, I believe it was Tornadus over Pelipper, but prioritizing a bit more offense on the Urshifu side. Yeah, you have a Mystic Water Urshifu. You could run a lot more bulk to combo off with the Clefairy. I'm not exactly sure what you would be trying to take, but you could just more or less take a spread similar to the team that Justin Tang won the San Antonio Regional with, and then just adjust speed as you go and, scale down or up bulk as you notice calcs that are pretty close. Beyond that, the Rillaboom is pretty standard. A Terra Water set to be able to live a Glacial Lance in a pinch. Incineroar is running Safety Goggles. I'm not running a Rocky Helmet Max Defense set because I think with Rain, oftentimes they're just going to be able to Surging Strikes you in Rain and knock you out. So I don't think EVing to live a hit outside of Rain makes a lot of sense when Rain's just going to be up a lot of the time in your game plan. So that's where that comes from. Aside of that, we have a Safety Goggle set with Will-O-Wisp, which means that if you play against Amoonguss plus Calyrex and they are not Terrafire, you can freely Will-O-Wisp them and limit a lot of their options. Looking at the Clefairy, it is a Life Dew set. I know a lot of teams were running Sing or After You, but I guess thinking that with Wide Guard Pelipper, you can just handle the Trick Room teams that way from the Calyrex Ice Rider, which makes sense. Life Dew definitely very good with the Calyrex Shadow Rider. If you're starting to get low on HP, you can go for Protect, Life Dew, and heal up 25% on both your Pokemon, which is definitely nice. The Pelipper here is basically just to boost up the Urshifu. I don't think I have the Terra type right. Let me check that in a second. But yeah, Wide Guard, Weather Ball, Hurricane, definitely its best moves in the format. And then you could go Tailwind or Helping Hand, but Theatime just going for the general utility of Protect, being able to stop double ups. Yeah, and just double checked, it is the Ghost Pelipper, which is pretty common to avoid Fake Outs. So that is actually all of the top 8 teams that I provided EV spreads. As mentioned, don't have a whole lot of time to go into all of the top 16 teams, but there definitely were some interesting ones, so I do want to cover those really quickly. So basically, we have this team from Sisiot, Francisco Pio Peros, top 16 finish, losing to Grant Laird. Very interesting team. I think this team got, I want to say top 32. It did well in San Antonio, but didn't end up making top cut. The things of note on a Terapagos team, we have the same Calm Mind leftover substitute set that combos really well with the grassy terrain being active. Scream Tail, another big finish for it, another in the top 16, so might be a Pokemon that is being generally undervalued in the metagame, just having the option to disable all the choice specs Pokemon or choice banded Pokemon in the meta is pretty cool. But the star of the show is, of course, the Heatran with the Magma Storm, which is a really solid Zamazenta counter. With Terra Fairy, Terra Blast, you can go for the Magma Storm, force it to go for a Terastallization. If you do hit, of course, it is 75% accurate. Assuming you hit, they kind of have to go for Terra Dragon in front of you. So with that in mind, you can go for Terra Fairy, Terra Blast in subsequent turns and really just handle that Pokemon, which is otherwise a huge pain for Terapagos teams. So yeah, big finish from him. We're going to go to the next team of interest. I think Kyle Livinghouse had a really cool take on Weezing Calyrex Shadow Rider, not going for the Dondozo mode, instead of going for another clearing mode. We have the Weezing, which can set up Toxic Spikes, Focus Sash Calyrex instead of Life Orb, prioritizing going for 2 Astral Barrages with Terra Ghost instead of the one single strong one that you'll get off with the choice specs or the Life Orb ones typically. Encore is pretty interesting. If someone tries to mind game you and go for Protects in front of your Pokemon, you can just go for Encore and really limit their ability to do that safely. But yeah, as mentioned, the Calyrex Shadow Rider and the Weezing, very threatening duo with the Toxic Spikes going up for the rest of the Pokemon in the back. Iron Hands is a Pokemon that just damage trades incredibly well with its natural bulk. No Drain Punch here, which is kind of surprising to me just because with Toxic Spikes and Drain Punch, your opponent is steadily going down while you're even healing some HP, which is cool. But nope, just going low kick for max damage against the restricted heavy Pokemon, heavy slam to deal with fairy types, and then wild charge as a good option against water types, like Urshifu. From there though, things get pretty crazy. We have a Chien-Pao Life Orb dealing insane damage like Stellar Terra, Sucker Punch, or Throat Chop are dealing really wild damage. Of course, we have the ever-dreaded Dragonite Chien-Pao combo with Choice Band Terra Normal, dealing a ton of damage. Once Toxic Spikes are up and something's taken a little bit of damage, even 2 ticks of Toxic Spikes is going to put it in the Dragonite Terra Normal sort of ruin range. And then last up, similar vein, if the Dragonite is not too strong against your opponent's team, you have the cleaner of the Urshifu Rapid Strike, which is going to deal insane damage with the Terra Water sort of ruin active. Congrats to Kyle, very innovative team, as we kind of do expect from him, one of the more innovative team builders that we've seen in the game. Going to be skipping any of the teams that aren't particularly different to things we've seen in the past. We have a pretty interesting team from Victor Jimenez Call. We have a Terra Electric Dondozo, so definitely going to resist an electric type move coming into it, but you'd still take a lot from Draco Meteor from Miraidon. Not entirely sure what's going on here. We have double choice item Fluttermane and Chi-Yu paired with the Orichalcum Pulse Koraidon running Ability Shield. You can lead it next to the Weezing, and then you go for Toxic Spikes and Poison Gas to allow the Rest Sleep Talk Dondozo to beat your opponent's team, just slowly, going for rest while they feint to poison while you're actually healing yourself up. So very interesting. Once the Dondozo has done its deed, you can bring in one of Chi-Yu or Fluttermane, I imagine, and just clean up with Heat Wave in the sun, paired with Koraidon potentially, or Fluttermane in the sun with Terra Fairy Dazzling Gleam. Next up, we have Eden Bachelor with a interesting take on the OE6 of basically a Calm Mind bulky Kyogre. Instead of going for the Incineroar that is typically here, as well as I want to say Urshifu. Yeah, we have a Basc Legion in the Urshifu slot. Similar role, just a fast sweeping rain physical attacker, and then our Chaladon over the Incineroar as a definitely very different option. We have Snarl, which functions as the damage limiting role that Incineroar has. Outside of that though, it is going to do kind of regulation HR Chaladon things next to the Kyogre, electroshotting things that are going for Terra Water in front of your water type moves, and then Draco Meteor to deal with the dragon types like Zamazenta. I know is definitely a big one if you get the Terra Bug active. They can't do a whole lot with any of their physical attackers like Rillaboom, Chien-Pao, Zamazenta itself. You can just force the Terastallization into the dragon type and knock it out with the Draco Meteor. So yeah, very cool team from Eden. Beyond that, we have a pretty cool team. I have no clue what's going on here, so I saw this before. It is an Iron Valiant with coaching, but the only solid beneficiary of it is really Roaring Moon kinda, but it's really the Okidogi with Assault Vest and the coaching. You go to +1 in special defense effectively from Assault Vest, +1 in defense, and +1 in attack. So Drain Punch, Knockoff, Upper Hand, Gunk Shot. Pretty good coverage, actually. You can intimidate it because of Guard Dog just boosting you up, so you'll deal really solid damage against opposing Incineroar if they try and intimidate you. which they are going to try and do against Calyrex Shadow Rider teams. Like, you are Terapagos, so they're always going to be trying to lead that to knock you off. So if you lead the Okidogi, I could actually see that being really, really filthy. Aside from that, we have a Friend Guard Mousehold with Helping Hand to support the Terapagos Choice Specs Calyrex Shadow Rider, a Weezing with neither Poison Gas or Toxic Spikes, which is kind of standard, but yeah, Taunt and Will-O-Wisp to limit your ability to knock out the Calyrex, and then Roaring Moon as a solid Tailwind user, and then Iron Valiant with Wide Guard to deal with Glacial Lance, opposing Calyrex Shadow Rider, Astral Barrages. Just a very interesting team that is unlike anything else we saw at the event. Yeah, outside of that though, most of the teams are fairly standard with one or two quirks to them. I saw like a Calyrex Shadow Rider team with Tailwind and Choice Specs Chi-Yu, so definitely a lot of cool things to look through if you're prepping for future tournaments, but I think that's going to do it for me today. This video has gone long enough, went into a lot of details on these top 8 teams. Once again, congrats to Wolfe. Can't emphasize enough that speech was pretty crazy. Yeah, really incredible event as a spectator. Looking forward to the next one. Hopefully this serves as a great competitive recap for everyone, and the teams are a useful resource. If you appreciate these videos, please subscribe, leave a like, and comment what you want to see from me in the future. With all that being said, peace y'all.